give you drugs in hopes that it's going to take away the deadly poisons that you've ingested. They spray your skies with metals that trickles down globally and poisons you and the earth. They force vaccines into your children, reminiscent of Nazis. And you sit there and wait for leaders to do something. You all have to be leaders. So I want you to stand up now and join the army of love. Come on. The work that Stephen does with absolutely no boundaries and borders to bring together some open-minded leaders in science and medicine is unparalleled. And it's the first time in the world's history that everyone in little villages in Africa, in mountains in South America, in towns in Asia, and all over your country, the United States, can get this information. And we can't let them stop that. So sit down and let's take a trip now. We have deforestation, which Anna Maria spoke about 2 hours yesterday. And this is what the world's slowly looking like. Not only is the Midwest on the way to doing this, they've already done it in the Middle East. 5G, the most dangerous thing they've ever proposed to put into our atmospheres. Global radiation, there's more radiation on the planet today than ever in history. They're chemicalizing your food and beverages, and putting opiates, synthetic opiates. You're sitting around watching television, getting more and more stressed with cortisol levels. You're eating animals, an ungodly thing that's not humane and, by the way, kills you and the planet. And people say it's hard, it's hard to suffer. It's not hard to change. Once you have the courage, this we allow to happen, and your so-called leaders allow it to happen. Since the Industrial Revolution, they've been polluting your water and the air. There's mountains of garbage. In Florida, the only mountains are the garbage mountains that we have. And what you're draping on your body every day gives you cancer and neurological problems. It alters your brain, called man-made fibers. The pharmaceutical fiasco is insane. The number 3 killer in the developed world now is medical mistake. Pharmaceutical drugs. When are we going to say no to this? You're a coward. You hide. It's time to stand and say no. They actually released Lyme ticks. And now here in Long Island and all over the world, these are poisoning people and altering their life. Where is this going to end? It's going to end when we all have enough love and enough self-respect and enough honor not to buy into it. The real discussion today, because they have reduced us to the lowest denominator, is money. And besides saying no, by the way, you have to learn to say the second thing. No, I'm not going to buy. I'm not going to support. I'm not going to encourage. But there's resolutions, and that's what you have to understand. Sane living in a world that's led by hungry, power-hungry idiots and greed mongers. That's what you are living in at this point. Wash them down and crap them out. That's what I say. This is a real detox we have to do. Liberate yourself by thinking clearly. minds are so fogged, you don't even know what's going on, most of the stuff. What kills and what heals? There's so many things that kill, but there's far more that heal. In the 50 years I've done my work, what's really interesting to me is when I've observed even the sickest people, which I've had the privilege to work with. The most sick people, less than 10% of their body is infected by a disease. That means over 90% is healthy. But what we do is we bend and we become the sick woman, the sick man, rather than the healthy person with a temporary problem. That's what we have to understand. So back in 1956, our founder, Ann Wigmore, after reversing catastrophic stage 4 cancer, and the Harvard doctors told her she was going to die, said, I have to now teach people. And she founded and created what today is called lifestyle medicine. The basis of all well-being, period, is your lifestyle, not the medicine. You were not created to consume medicine. You were created to consume positive thought, constant productive movement, to strengthen, build your body, allow your organs, your circulatory system to function and work, to eat food that's pristine and alive, that literally engages every cell in your body and increases the biofrequency fields so that aging and disease cannot permeate you. You were created as a spiritual entity, not a religious person, but a person who understands 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, throughout your entire life, that you are part of a larger whole, a universal wisdom and knowledge. And your struggle is that you don't feel you fit into that universal whole. So you're trying to be independent. And it's great to think positively and independently, but relax, because the universe is there to take care of you. It always will turn out. If our species is brave enough to stand up and join the army of love and start to love the demons out, we're going to survive. But if we do not do that, and we're at that pivotal moment right now in the next 50 years, the earth is going to continue, it's going to rotate, and eventually there'll be another species, and let's hope the hell they're smarter than us. They have you so brainwashed, you go along with the latest trend because you tried something for 2 weeks and it was just a little too hard for you to stick to it. So as soon as you lose your imagination, they come up with the latest thing. Now it's the ketogenic diet. Eat all the fat you want, including butter. The last 75 years of research isn't enough to tell you that causes cancer, heart disease, strokes, diabetes. 75 years. I guess we don't believe in science like that anymore. The biggest, most idiotic thing I've ever seen people like you buy is ground up bones from a sick chicken so that your complexions can be nicer. You know what would be better? Listen closely, man. If you took mud from outside here and put it on your face, that has some value. But ground up bones from a sick chicken isn't going to make you look pretty. What makes you look pretty is commitment to yourself. Happiness, joy, positivity. That's what makes you happy. And you ever notice nobody looks pretty unless they're smiling? Not even these guys up here. The paleo diet. That's an interesting one. Who governs the meat industry, the ranching industry around the country is the Texas Cattlemen's Association. Imagine what they have. Hello, Texas Cattlemen. Got that big hat just to show you I'm a macho. They're watching really closely the trends. Oh, these trends are scary. Last year, plant-based diet consumption went up over 1,000%. This year, we're on track for 2,000%. So they come up with a half-wit, non-scientific bullshit history called the paleo diet. And you say, well, I'll lose a little pounds. They've reduced our imagination that health is about losing pounds. How about flourishing, thriving, having boundless energy, being joyous, being happy, being loving, being a good husband, a good wife, a good citizen, a good mother, a good father, a good friend. Isn't that what we are after? Or, let's lose a few pounds. Get your act together. Now we're going to make this really simple in the beginning. What is digestible by the human body and what is not digestible? Well, I'll look at the first 2 decades of my life right here in the New York area. Everything I ate was impossible to digest. I ate animals, I ate white bread, I ate sugar, and I ate lots and lots of dessert. Matter of fact, I should have started with dessert and then worked our way down. None of that was usable by the body. So now, like most people listening today, your poor body is trying to take this nonsense and push it out. So all the energy that should be there for joy, longevity, health, and happiness is going to push garbage out of your system. And no wonder we're lethargic and lazy and confused. No wonder you're putting your kids on a cocaine drug called Ritalin. Because your kids are fed up with you, your nonsense parents. And their poor little brains are confused because you're cross-circuited with sugar. And no wonder. And how dare us put our babies, 2, 3, 4-year-old babies, on cocaine drug called Ritalin. How dare us allow heroin addicts, 80% of them, to start their heroin addiction in every socioeconomic group in the United States and in the world in a medical doctor's office. And we don't challenge that nonsense. When I was a little boy, my grandpop would drive me into the Bowery in New York. The Bowery in New York was the only place in America you saw people living on the street. Now, every single corner I stop at every single light, Americans, my fellow Americans, are on a street. And he used to say, look at those people. You got to stop. You can never take those drugs. You can never drink that drug called alcohol. Look at those poor men. And it was embedded in my mind. But look at what we tolerate today. It's unbelievable. This is what you call food. We call them pigs for a reason. And you eat these things. You call them loin of pork rather than ass of pig. You're taking sugar with alcohol in it, deadly chemicals. Beer, by the way, the least chemicals in beer in this country are 56 chemicals. They take the baby boy chickens and throw them away. They grind them up for feed. And by the way, you're putting perfume on your body that's altering your sexuality and potentially giving you mutagenic diseases called cancer. And if you're lucky, fibroid or cystic problems. So we talk about red meat, red meat. You know, often I hear people say to me, I don't eat meat, I eat fish. What the heck do you think fish is? I don't eat meat, I eat chicken. What the heck do you think chicken is? I don't eat meat, I eat eggs, unborn meat. Well, I'm a lacto-ovo-vegetarian. I only drink milk. Really smart thing. Any of you want to be a 1,000-pound cow? That's what the milk is for. You say, oh, Brian, but Dr. Shmaruki from the University of Baruki says you must have milk or your bones will crumble. Dr. Shmaruki is a schmuck. And by the way, chicken and turkey are worse than red meat. And when I was a kid, How you could tell a family was poor is if they didn't eat red meat, if they ate chicken. And now the yuppies like chicken because it's organic chicken. All you guys in the BMWs and the Mercedes going to I was there this morning, a Whole Food Market, in your high heels and walking fancy down there. We are organic. You're idiots. They're sucking your brains out and your wallet at the same point. No such thing as organic anything like that. This is the answer. You know, it's been really, really pleasant for me since 1975 when I joined Hippocrates Health Institute, is I can go to any place on the planet Earth, from the poorest people in the world to Beverly Hills and Madison Avenue, and tell people that they can afford to eat the most powerful, the most nutritious, and the most healing food ever researched in the history of science and medicine, called sprouts. But you say, well, I read all these studies on how this was good and that was good and that was good. You didn't read the right studies. So I'm going to give you a little bit of homework. Those of you that really just don't like to come to enthusiastic lectures but like to learn something. The most important scientist on sprouts works at a little organization called the Linus Pauling Institute. Linus Pauling Institute used to be at the Stanford campus when Pauling was a professor at Stanford. And out of respect after his death, they moved it to Oregon State University, his alma mater. I'm going to tell you a story about it because it's touching. I had the privilege to meet the man twice. I didn't know him, but he was a kind guy. I can usually tell when a person's kind. I look at their eyes. He was unique and rare as an intellectual because he didn't talk over people's heads. He talked from his heart. And when he was a young guy, he was one of the smartest, if not the smartest student that ever went to Oregon State University. And when he was moving into his third year, his mom called and said, "You have to come home, Dad died." And back then, there was integrity in families. And the oldest son took the place of the dad to feed the family. And he told all the professors, "I've got to leave school." And the professors panicked because they were great academics. They couldn't lose this brilliant mind. They saw what this kid didn't see at that point. And they said, "We have to find a way that you can support your family and you have to remain a student." You know what they ended up doing? He wasn't even an undergraduate. They put him in charge of training some of the classes for graduates. Oregon State University. Dr. David Williams, write his name down. Dr. David Williams is the most important man on the research of sprouts globally, but there are hundreds of others. I'm giving you now the important one. I write books on this. How many of you are doctors here or scientists? Well, the books I happen to write, you may want to read. They're an academic series called Food is Medicine. And I talk about the most significant out of thousands of studies that confirm not only plant-based, the power of sprouts. Now, when you think about sprouts uniquely, they are little seeds that can actually produce hundreds and thousands of other seeds. Isn't that amazing? If you have quadruplets, people freak out. How about if you were a sunflower and said, "I had 1,000 of guculets"? And every single sunflower has that. And can you imagine the power that that seed has? And you are taking hundreds or thousands of those a day and drinking them or eating them in your food. We're now taking you into quantum biology, the way that legitimate nutritionists are moving. Not talking about protein, vitamins, minerals. Interesting stuff, but old school. That's old school stuff. It's the energy, the power, the frequency, and by the way, the healing benefit we call phytochemicals. These phytochemicals are so stunning that the more we study them, the more in awe we are of them. We have never discovered a disease or a sprout that cannot address a particular disease. And every seed, every nut, every grain, every bean can be grown into a sprout. When you're spitting seeds out, don't do it. Spit them into a dehydrator, dry them, and sprout them. You're wasting the most powerful food we've ever researched. Broccoli sprouts, for instance, we knew the anti-cancer effect. How many of you knew about this effect? The sulforaphane. It regulates two enzymes, protect against any cancer throughout the body. Any cancer. And by the way, when you consume this before getting cancer, guess what? It's the most effective anti-cancer prevention ever looked at in biology. How about also looking at what we know? We can take the sprout if you have a wound, a burn, a cut, grind it up, mush it up, and put it directly on. Most effective healing agent ever researched and discovered. And by the way, it costs a whole lot less than the prescription you're going to get. And where's the medicine cabinet? On your kitchen counter. And when do you do it? In the summer, 12 months a year. And you say, oh, we can't get fresh food in the winter. Yes, you can. From your kitchen window, you can get fresh food. The one place in the world that was smashingly popular, a good friend of mine, we used to call him Sprouty. Back in the 60s, he converted his bus. You remember the buses with the peace signs? He wanders all the way up from the Pacific Northwest into Alaska. We thought he was going to go up for the summer. He didn't come back for 4 years. Because people never saw anything grow up there for 10 months a year. Became popular. And by the way, they did a little study, some competent, wonderful physicians, medical physicians, mainstream physicians up there, and said, my God, do you realize that in these towns that you've been distributing sprouts, the distribution of medicine dropped 35 to 40%. From one act, just people eating sprouts. Oh, meat and cheese, really good for you. It wasn't bad enough I was eating meat. I would take a piece of meat, put some cheese, and put a piece of meat, and I'd have a meat-cheese sandwich. Now, what we know about this is these high-protein diets. Listen closely. These are not Brian's opinions. These are the most significant research and the epitome of the research on the planet today for this. Makes you nearly twice as likely to die. So if you want to die, double the possibility, you're going to die anyway, but you want to speed it up by 50%, knock yourself out. Eat any level of meat, yes, meat, fish, chicken, turkey, pork, wild meat, eggs. And guess what? You have 4 times greater chance of getting any form of cancer. Any of you listening to me now, it's deadly quiet in here. You're saying, oh my God, why did I have chicken McNugget today before I came? Or I went to the organic place and got organic poached eggs. My BMW. Get off your high horse. So you say, I only have healthy dairy. That's an oxymoron. No such thing as healthy dairy. How many of you know that 1 cup, 8-ounce glass, by law, in all of the developed world, yes, you listening all over the world today, as well as you New Yorkers, has permitted 750,000 pus particles in it. I will repeat a fact to you that nobody's going to tell you in the dairy industry. 1 8-ounce cup of milk, by law, everywhere in the developed world, allows 750,000 pus spores in it. You say, oh, I don't know why, I have an allergy. The pus is trying to come out your nose. And that's the stuff you see. How about the stuff in your veins, in your colon, in your heart, in your kidney? And you say, well, I have organic kefir. Milk. The latest one they've conned you on is Greek yogurt. I love Greece too, but the yogurt in Greece is the same as the yogurt everywhere else. It's yogurt. And when you look at goat and sheep, you say, well, I don't take cow's milk, I take goat and sheep. Sheep milk is almost twice as fat as cow's milk. No wonder you like it. You spin it really quick, it turns into whipped cream. Milk and dairy intake. High milk intake was associated with higher mortality and higher fractures. The opposite of what you've been told. Harvard University finally pinned them about 10 years ago. They said, everything you've been teaching us from the time we were kids is wrong. And by the way, on the contrary, if you want more fractures, if you want more osteoporosis, if you want more arthritis, drink milk. Or, by the way, organic Greek yogurt. Say, well, Brian, how come I've never heard this before? If I had the budget that these industries have, you'd hear it. I'd be yelling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You'd get up and say, I can't listen to another minute of this guy, and I'd come into your room and yell. You need to be awakened. Now, what does build the bones? And what does give you the most protein? And what does make cells strong so you don't get anemic and you don't age premature? And what does have the phytochemicals in it? And what does have the enzymes that bring life and energy back into your body? Green juice. You say, well, I take green drinks. I have 4 green apples and 1 bit of parsley and a mango. That is not a green juice. That is sugar with a tad of green in it. You've got to get rid of the sugar. I know you love it. I know you can't get rid of it. But Dr. Maruki from Baruki said, Baruch. Maron to Maruki. Maruki's wrong. We're in the new era of nutritional science. I'm not here to rehash everything that has been rehashed and obviously doesn't work. I'm here to tell you what we have done for 64 years, watching hundreds of thousands of people clinically use, and we see the results. Other people have opinions. We have massive experience. There's a big difference between an opinion. I have a lot of opinions. My wife has more opinions, and she usually wins. So these fresh juices made from all green plants are going to build the bloodstream. Remember, I don't want to get elaborate on this, but every drop of energy, including you, your whole body, comes from the sun. And green leafy plants evolved on this very planet Earth to capture the energy from the sun, which propelled life as we know it on the planet Earth. Why wouldn't you go to the place where the life begins? Bro, let's go. Give me a bow and arrow. I'm going to go kill a deer. Craziness. We're a little nuts, aren't we? So salt. People tell you how great salt is. All I want to do is ask any of you who have had high blood pressure, when you took any level of salt, even Himalayan, Celtic, crystal, and expensive yuppie organic salt, does it put your blood pressure up? Of course it does. Because all salt, no matter what they call it, is sodium chloride. Sodium chloride dehydrates the body, contracts internal organs and ventricles and capillaries, makes it smaller. When you put a sodium in that makes your veins smaller, the same amount of blood has to go through the pipe, the vein, and the blood pressure goes up. So the doctor is really right on that one. Don't take salt. Now you need salt, by the way. Salt is central to your well-being. Your immune system would not work. The electrolytes in your body would not function. The energy source. How many of you recognize the green batteries today are made out of sodium? You can actually make a light go on with these. So powerful. But the type of sodium you need is organic sodium. You can get that from very easy and very accessible things like celery and the juice of celery, and celery seeds, and seaweeds. That's where you can get that sodium, because you need it. The sodium is actually the antiseptic that cleans the lymph glands after the lymph gland purifies the body, because it's a major filter system of the body. A study was done in England. It was pretty frightening. England doesn't have nearly a third of the people we have. And they found out by just reducing, not eliminating, just reducing sodium in packaged products, they'd save 75,000 lives a year. Listen to what I'm telling you, people. Do you think that life Doesn't matter. Maybe it's somebody's mother or somebody's husband or somebody's father or somebody's child. I think every life matters. And so we do these studies arrogantly in the universities, in our pearl towers. And what is done? What is the application of that? There is no wherewithal, there's no leadership and no consciousness and no spiritual increment. And our leaders should stand up immediately and say, to save one life, we are going to outlaw putting sodium like that into products. Now, if 75,000 people in this small country of England die, we have 3 times more added up. 200, 250, and maybe more, because we eat more sodium than any country on the planet Earth die in the United States. Do you think 300,000, 200,000 lives of American citizens are worthwhile to say, stop eating sodium? But then you have health authorities telling you how great sodium is? Wake up. Fermented foods. Those of you that saw the panel last night, an honor to be there with these great people who really came from their heart and had a reservoir of experience and humbleness. And one of the gentlemen said, well, you know, the longest living people, by the way, they eat a little bit of meat. Now, that's not true. There's something called the 7 blue zones. It was 5, you may remember. And what happened is the journalist got sick of all of us because he read the blood type diet, and he read the paleo diet, and the ketogenic diet, and the living diet, and the vegan diet, and the ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-doop-bump-ba-dum-bump-bump. And he said, you're all full of baloney because you're saying this, and they're saying that, and she's saying this, and what's right? So he did the right thing. He went out and saw what people were doing who lived the longest. And it took him a long time. He couldn't find too many people that lived a long time. And there were little pockets of people. We have one, those really wild Christians called the Seventh-Day Adventists, that actually read the first page. The rest of you don't. How many of you are Christians here? Hallelujah. Read the first page. Meat shall be from the trees. Medicine should be from the earth. So they took it literally. So they're eating plant-based diets and crappy ones. They eat like make-believe hot dogs. And they commonly live over 100. Sardinia, Costa Rica. And they are greatly plant-based. 2 of them eat none in the form of animals. But the one thing they all are doing, except one group, is eating a lot of fermented food. Now, fermented food, by the way, when I studied this, I was surprised. There is no culture, dietary culture anywhere in the world that doesn't ferment food. I was really surprised. In Asia, they ferment food. In Europe, they ferment food. South America, they ferment food. And it wasn't an odd thing when I really thought it out, because before there was refrigeration and you lived in colder climates, how did you have anything to eat in the middle of winter? Unless you fermented it or put salt on it if it was an animal, or put sugar on it if it was a vegetable. Now, this is where we got into the sugar and salt habits, by the way. Because before refrigeration, first refrigeration was in the mid-1800s, started in Scotland. Took really a long time until the 20th century, till it was greatly employed. And when my grandfather was a young kid, and my father remembers it, who's now in his 90s, ice boxes were called ice boxes because they took a big block of ice, and they lasted a week, and you put some stuff in there. But before that, it was salt and sugar. Why? Because life forms do not live in salt and sugar. Fermented food, lots of life forms live in it. And the good news is when you take something like the cabbage family, such an enormous amount of sulfur in it that it doesn't let bad bacteria come in. But it does give you something called I'd like to have a little bit of that versus a low immunity. So when you're taking in this nectar of extraordinary healthy probiotics, it is going to engage and raise your immune system like nothing else. So you don't have to eat a lot of this, little bits of it throughout the week. Watch out, the kimchi has a lot of what in it? Sodium. You can make it on your own without that. Sauerkraut, if you buy it commercially, may And most of it's cooked. You don't want the cooked variety. And this is so easy to make. Hopefully, all of you will be wise enough to buy yourself an appropriate juicer. Not one of these, but one of these. Like the teeth. Hundreds of pounds of pressure squeezing deep into the cell of that leaf. It extracts the blood of the plant, the sun from the plant. And that same juicer, if you put a blank in it, if you put cabbage through it, homogenizes it and makes mushy cabbage that you can now put into a jar, sit on your counter 12 months a year for 3 days, and voila, you have sauerkraut. Now, to add some new dimension to that for antimicrobial problems, anti-mutagenic problems, throw in some garlic cloves. If you're German, you'll probably want juniper berries in it, because that's what you remember as a child. You can put parsley in it. By the way, you can take the juice, don't put the blank in, of cabbage. Then take root vegetables that have low sugar content, not carrots and beets. You love them, I know. And you soak them in that juice of cabbage for 4 days, and voila, now you have fermented root vegetables. And you know how much this costs? So little, nobody can't afford it. And how long does it last? If you refrigerate it, months, year and a half. So you want fermented food to raise a what? Immune system. The immune system loves fermented food. Alcohol. So a lot of people say, well, you know, I only drink the finest aged alcohol that's all biological. That's the people who know French. It's bio booze. Booze is a poison. There is no alcohol that is healthy for you. Period. You say, well, the studies from the alcohol industry show? Oh, yes. The studies from the meat industry show? Oh, yes. The dairy industry, the bread industry, the pharmaceutical industry? Oh, yes, they show it, because that's where they invest their marketing dollars. At corrupt organizations like Harvard and Stanford and Princeton and Cornell and Oxford and Cambridge and McGill, because they want the big name boys. They want the major league boys to back them. And they tell you, well, alcohol is good. A few winters ago, because they always come out with these studies around October, November, just before the holidays. The holidays, you guys booze it up, man. You never drink in your life, you're boozing it up on the holiday. From Thanksgiving until New Year's Eve, what? You're in seventh heaven there. So I couldn't believe this study. I said, they are really taking the public as fools. Seemingly you are. And this came out of Denmark, their largest university. I happened to live in Denmark back in the 70s. Really nice country. They're happy as hell. And this study said, if you take 1 glass of whiskey a day, your health is going to improve. Listen to this. Your health is going to improve. But if you take 2, your life expectancy will drop by 3 years. I said, look, I know not everyone has formal educations in mathematics, but if double makes you die 3 years sooner, does half make you die in a year and a half sooner? But you said, well, the top university in Denmark said, whiskey is good. And they say, well, the grapes inside of wine have an antioxidant effect that's good. I blow that out of the water and show about 20 studies in my academic books called Food is Medicine, that once it ferments into alcohol, this phytochemical is gone. It doesn't exist. If you just take the grape skin, that's where this antioxidant phytochemical is. Fermented in alcohol, why? Because the other thing they preserve things in. You can preserve part of a human body in alcohol for hundreds of years. Because life does not live in alcohol. Life does not live in salt. Life does not live in sugar. But you eat alcohol, and you eat sugar, and you eat salt. And you think this stuff is healthy for you, and some idiot health authority is telling you it is good for you. I wonder whose payroll she's on, or he's on. Last year, I was so happy. 2 prominent scientists, the same year, 2019, came out and said, there is no level of alcohol that's good. Now look into this. mortality rates dramatically increase with alcohol. Alcohol consumption has been linked to an increase in a wide variety and types of cancer. Not only in the throat, esophageal forms of cancer, the larynx, but also stomach, colon, rectal, liver, breast, and ovarian cancer. Any of you want those cancers? Keep boozing it up on your organic wine. You say, well, the alcohol in wine is different than whiskey. It's the same thing. Those of you that are chemists here know what I'm talking about. If I analyze alcohol from a wine or alcohol from a whiskey, it is the same chemical composition. And guess what it is? It's highly, highly fermented sugars. Now we go back the big circle. So why do you preserve parts of bodies for hundreds of years in this stuff? Because the base of the fermentation of the whiskey is grains and sugar, of the wine is grapes and sugar, and this is a deadly poison. The other thing I want to blow out of the water here is I'm tired of them saying, the governments that make billions and billions of dollars of tax dollars globally every year, alcohol and drugs. Alcohol is the worst drug that humans have ever put their hands on, destroyed more lives, killed more people, and continues to do it. That's the drug. You yuppies, stop your shit. You could eat exactly like I'm telling you. You could exercise more than I'm telling you. You could have the best attitude in the world. You're drinking polluted water, you're going to die. We're sitting on an island now that has, in one geographic location, the worst cancer cause in dioxins ever discovered in the history of geology. That was just discovered 2 years ago here. And the best water people in the country don't know how they're going to clean this out. Because the filters you're buying, even the expensive ones, are not doing the job. Let me now say, dioxins are, hands down, the most significantly researched carcinogen in the history of cancer-causing chemicals. Every bit of your water is loaded with it here in Long Island. The top water researchers, Ph.D s that I know and work with, who, by the way, one from Long Island, doesn't know how they're going to get that out of the water here. He has the best system. I have the system in my house. Because it's so small, it's atomic particles, subatomic particles. It goes right through. Distilled water. You say, oh, immediately my computer program. Distilled, you need minerals, it's going to rob the bones. Wrong. If you believe hydrogen and oxygen, that's what water is. It's not a living thing that's seductive. It's hydrogen and oxygen. Goes into the body, knocks on the door of the bone and says, come on out, cells. No wonder you believe that bone broth is good for you. I've been drinking almost exclusively for half a century distilled water. A few years ago, I was at the University of California, Los Angeles. They couldn't wait when they heard I was a vegan to say, oh, can we do a bone density test on you? I said, when will the results come? I had to go up the coast to San Francisco to lecture. They said, oh, by next week. I said, oh, good, I'll come. They couldn't wait to get me back there. I sat in the room, there was dead silence. They didn't say a word. Finally, I said, so what are the results? And they passed it over to me. And finally, after about 10 minutes, one of the guys was nice enough to say, this is the same readings we get on our 20-year-old football players here. I was in my 50s at that time. I started to drink distilled water almost exclusively when I was 20 years old. And I was lucky. I wasn't smart. I had a mentor from New York, by the way, from the city, who basically said, you don't want to die, drink distilled water. I did. All waters on the planet Earth that you are drinking are loaded with pharmaceutical drugs, loaded with plastics. And yes, the hit parade notables, chlorine, fluoride, and locally dioxins. And God knows what else. And how that happens is a universal spread of these chemicals through something called rain. And it goes from the top of the planet to the lowest part, South Pole, North Pole, and it saturates our groundwater, and it is so small, it's almost impossible to get this stuff out unless you're separating the water from the particulate. That's why distillers do it. I know people literally, we've tested, they bought $15,000, $20,000 units. It takes 3 or 4% out. They had to scrap $20,000 units and buy distillers, which, by the way, are a lot less expensive, I can tell you. Although we tell you not to eat a lot of fruit, there's overwhelming evidence that fruit has powerful antioxidant agents preventing cardiovascular disease, cancers, etc. The problem is 80% of you, 85% of you shouldn't eat any level of sugar because you are in trouble. 6 out of 10 of us are sugar addicted to such a point we have either beginnings of or full blast low blood sugar, which is a precursor of diabetes type 2. Once again, I'll repeat, 60% of the population I am now addressing either has low blood sugar, on the way to low blood sugar, from low blood sugar hypoglycemia to diabetes, and you'll eventually get diabetes. Diabetes is one of the fastest growing diseases in the history of medicine. And it used to be when I was a kid in school, they said it's adult onset diabetes, not type 2. Well, I wish it was adult onset diabetes. It is childhood type 2 diabetes. Because 2 out of 3 people contracting diabetes now are below 16. That's our culture. Give little Mary, give little Johnny a treat, because they've been good boys and girls. All berries are good for you, but guess what? Those of you who cannot take berries, get on the internet, buy the seeds of these berries. Because the seeds of these berries, listen closely, are 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 times more beneficial with phytochemicals than the berries. You're going to say, well, I don't like it as much as the berry. No, because it has no taste. You take these powders, you take these seeds, and either you germinate them if you're really industrious, or, by the way, you put them on your salad or put them in a drink that you're making. Evidence is accumulating, and the consumption of berries may be a strategy to forestall, even reverse age-related neuronal deficiencies. Anyone know what they are? Neurological deficiencies. So now we're going beyond the cancers and the heart problems. We're now showing that this is great for the nervous system and the brain. So the original work that was done was specific to this. At Tufts, 2 of the guys in that study, one oncologist, one Ph.D., literally called me after that, all excited. They said, boy, these berries are just... And what is a berry that is the top of the list? Blackberry, cranberry. Then we get to blueberry, raspberries. And the black raspberry is a little bit better than the red raspberry. In order to increase healthy aging, who wants healthy aging here? Raise your hand. Who wants no aging? That's what we're really trying to get to here. I often speak at the Longevity Foundation, and that's what they're after. I said, when you figure it out, call me. I'll be there. How about algae and seaweeds, the second life form on this planet and the first life form on this planet? Algae, microscopic algae, was the very first life when the sun beamed down from up in the atmosphere. What evolved and what was created on this earth, the first life form was blue-green algae. It is so small you cannot see it with the bare eye. But that has the highest protein of any food known to man. This is why this morning when I got up in this very hotel, I took 5 types of algae, which I do every single day all through my life. Shortly after a green algae, you called it chlorella, was created. Shortly after a phytoplankton was created. And then shortly after what you see on the screen was created. And these are high lipids. The essential fats that con artists told you get from fish oil come from algae. But con artists want to sell you fish oil. That's rancid and causes cancer and heart disease. You say, well, Brian, Dr. Maruki from the University of Baruki, we told you Maruki from Baruki is a schnook. Fish. Oh, you like fish. I mean, here we are in Long Island. Looks like a phallic symbol when you're up above it. We have the finest fish on the East Coast here. Fishermen go out there and pull in the fish all the time. We go right to the docks and we get the fish. So good for you because I think it's just, it's filled with proteins and essential fatty acids. And 8 of my doctors told me I need it because my brain's going to work better. Wrong, 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 wrong. Bring those girls and boys in. Next time we're here in Long Island, I'll have a debate with them. Because those fish eat something called algae. Now, a lot of you say, well, I'm smart. I don't eat cows. I eat what the cow eats because that's where the protein comes from. Make any sense to any of you here? I know that goes over your head, most of you, but, The cow would die if it didn't eat something called greens, grass. The fish would not have essential fat because the fish, just like you, is saturated fat. The animal body of the fish is saturated animal fat. It's an animal. Where does it get the omega oil? From the algae. So just like you're eating greens to get the protein, how about if you eat the algae to get the essential oils? But it's so hard to give all these things up. I remember when I was a little boy, I was out fishing with my dad. We had really close times together. We bonded as men. Get the heck over it. Wake up. You have fond memories of death and dying? Excessive fish. This is what they call excessive fish intake. This is what I used to eat in one day. 3 to 4 servings per month. Who eats 3 or 4 servings of fish on Long Island per month? You're doing that every day because Dr. Baruchi from the University of Baruchi told you. Good for you. And you've read on the internet that reliable source of data that's being completely manipulated and controlled by corporate interest. This is a problem. Now, mercury happens to be the nicest metal in it. How many of you read my book, Killer Fish? Killer Fish gets to mercury somewhere way in the back of the book. That's the nicest thing you find in fish. So the smart people here, the educated people here say, fish, mercury. How about every ungodly chemical known to man in fish? There is no chemical that man has ever created we don't find in fish. Let me put it in very clear words. They studied bodies of fish, every single aspect of the planet Earth, from the top to the bottom. They never discovered a fish that wasn't loaded with a wide array of deadly chemicals. Period. You say, well, the great northern salmon, that's the sales pitch they have, like the Greek yogurt. The great northern salmon. Deadly poison. And the other thing, there's no control over this industry like there's no control over any industry. They can call it great northern salmon, and most of it comes from cesspool factory farms in China, where they put hundreds, listen closely, hundreds of fish in an area where several fish should be. And they are so sick that they pour gallons of antibiotics in. And when they take the salmon out, they actually literally paint them red and pink. So you think it's from an Eskimo catching it in midair as it flies out of the water. Man, oh man, if I had marketing dollars, would I con you? I'd have grass flying all over the place. People biting it, chewing it. You say, well, shit, that's what people used to do in the paleo days. You're easy to sway, man. We aim to investigate the effect of increased fish muscle intake on mercury. What fish did I eat? I used to eat the laziest fish on the planet Earth. Like clams. Lambs can't even run away. And when I was a kid, I was out clamming all day. I had to pee. I'd pee where I was clamming. I'd look over, there was a pipe. The sewage was coming in. Didn't put 2 and 2 together. How about Lobsters. These things lay at the bottom, and all the crap that falls to the bottom, that's what they eat. And it wasn't bad enough we ate lobsters, but we used to dip them in butter. Well, we really want a heart attack this time. Who's the guy that did The Sopranos? What was his name? The beautiful guy. Yeah, Nandafi. The guy was eating lobster and steak when he died. No wonder the hell he died. He died at what, a 50-year-old man? Even though he was a mob boss, the lobster got him. One of the great medicines in history, and the more we study this, the more brilliant it becomes, cayenne pepper, or the extract, the medicine capsicum. This stuff is now being used to get rid of the worst pain, neurological pain, neuropathies. Can you imagine this? If you'd asked me a few years ago, I'd say, no, don't take it. I was wrong. There's evidence today that it's the most effective medicinal plant or medicine ever used to get rid of really severe neuropathies. So the cayenne's great, but if you really want to get the medicine, you have the most successful herbal company in the world right here on Long Island. How many of you know that? It's called Biobotanical. Biobotanical makes an incredibly high quality. They pioneered, literally, discovered the way to preserve the essence of the plants, the herbal plants, in glycerin. What that's like doing is putting a plastic bag so tight around it, it lasts forever, because no oxygen gets into it. And when that glycerin-based capsicum, the medicine from this, gets into your mouth, it comes off. And now you can take that. So literally, if it's properly manufactured, which they do here, it would last 50, 70, 100 years and still be as powerful at that point. It's hot as heck. That's the problem. Hot as heck. So just put in a little bit of water or juice if you don't like hot, and then take it down. And if you have the neurological problems, but if you have cardiovascular problems, circulatory problems, memory loss problems, because anything that has to do with circulation and movement, this works with. Now, when you companion this with something called nitric oxide, now you're doing powerhouse stuff. So this is some of the things we use beyond the diet and lifestyle for people. So now you say, well, poultry. How many of you read my book, Poison Poultry? Yeah, because that's what it is. There is no such thing as organic poultry. Who governs the so-called organic meat industry is the meat industry. And I actually show you pictures. I do a whole 2-hour conference on this, of the factory farm where they don't even bother to put a sophisticated sign on it. They get some guy with paint to say organic on the side, and they open the window 30 minutes a day, and they call it free range. There's nothing I'm joking about. This is funny and sick, but I'm not joking. It's what they do. The eggs, they love the cageless eggs. You yuppies love that cageless egg stuff. You don't know what the hell it is, but you want to buy it. It even costs more money. Because now they don't have to buy those expensive stainless steel cages. So now the poor animals walk on top of one another, and we now know on an average there's a 15% higher death rate in the cageless egg factory farms. Because the ones at the top urinate, the ones at the bottom die of what? Ammonia poisoning. Turkey. How many of you saw my book, the picture in my book of turkeys 1920, 1960, and 2020? They are over 129 times larger. All turkeys are artificially inseminated. Turkeys can no longer mount one another and make love. They have to artificially inseminate them so you can have a pleasant Thanksgiving, a pleasant Christmas. Is it pleasant? The transfer of antimicrobials from chicken is the number one cause of antibiotic resistance. So almost always it's antibiotic resistance coming from consumption of poultry, including eggs. Eggs are poultry, remember that. When Anna Maria first came and we used to go into the whole food market from Sweden, she'd say, that's really weird. They put all this stuff in the dairy section. They put eggs in the dairy section. You ever notice that? Well, whoever's running the store is not that smart. He thinks a cow drops eggs. These embryos of chicken, that's what they are. I report that they went all over the world. They looked at 1,300,000 eggs. Once again, 1,300,000 eggs over 60 countries, and found out that 90% of those eggs, half of which were called organic, had Salmonella or E. coli or both Salmonella or E. coli. You don't have to cook them and eat them. You just have to touch them, rub your eye, and you'll get it. Well, I go to the local guy who his eggs are healthy eggs because they live on Long Island. Woo! There's some deep shit going on in here. I know you must love where you live, but Long Island's not a healthy place to live. In conclusion, consumption of eggs may increase the risk of developing the most severe form of prostate cancer. Now, we have overwhelming evidence. The number one cause of the deadliest form of prostate cancer comes from men consuming eggs, or women who think they have a prostate and consume eggs. I'll tell you a funny story why I say that. About 10 years ago, a woman comes and I'm looking at her blood test, and she said the doctor was concerned with my prostate numbers when I called him. That's not a true story. I said, well, I'm sorry to say that your doctor must be exhausted because you don't have a prostate. But I like my doctor. He's a nice guy. I said, he may be nice, but he's dumb. And what I want you to do here in my office is call back the nurse or him and ask for your money back on the prostate test that you had. And tell him I think your prostate's perfectly fine. Every single week, by the way, we find new evidence how great nuts are for you. Now, the two nuts that you love the most, I'm going to take away from you. Peanuts, aflatoxins, bad, cancer, and cashews, which are all cooked in the process. All other nuts are amazingly good for you, as long as they are O and R. What's O and R? Organic and raw. Organic and raw. It's really funny because when I was a boy in the 50s, my grandpop and I used to go to Yankee Stadium, and it was wonderful. I mean, back in those days, those guys were just so down to earth. They didn't make money. Matter of fact, one of my good friends, Dr. Tom, he was a doc for the Yankees back in the 50s and 60s. And he said that, do you realize half those guys or more they lived in cottages close to the stadium, and they had to have different jobs because they didn't make enough money as players. And Mantle would come up, Roger Maris, Joe Pepitone, Whitey Ford, they'd shake your hand. And my grandpop and I went there to do two things, eat roasted nuts and hot dogs with sauerkraut. I didn't realize I was seeing the greatest baseball team that ever existed in the history of baseball. I knew the roasted nuts, so now I become a vegan 50 years ago, and I literally say, well, at least it's a vegan food. And somebody said, well, roasted nuts are bad for you. Bad for your heart, it's bad for a whole lot of things. I said, okay, so I hated raw nuts. But one thing that filled me up, and a lot of you are facing that around the world today listening to me, is when you give up animal flesh and heavy foods and 2 pounds of potatoes with gravy and butter on it, you feel empty. It's an emotional thing, by the way. You're not empty, you're filled. If you're eating healthy plant-based diet, you're now filled with nutrition for the first time in your life, probably. But you feel empty because you've been squashing your feelings and emotion with food. How do I know that? I was an expert at it. Squashing my emotions with food. So now you want to fill up with something. So I was literally eating 2 to 3 pounds of nuts a day. The end result is I got hemorrhoids. Although I'm telling you nuts are incredibly good for you, not 2 or 3 pounds of nuts a day. And the other thing we have to do with nuts is something I don't do well myself still, chew. You got to put on, like really sexy music, like a Frank Sinatra number or something, and chew until the song's over. That's the only way I can do it. Listen to this is highlights out of several hundred studies. Frequent nut consumption is associated with reversing pancreatic cancer. How do you like that? So you say, well, I used to be an alcoholic. I ate sugar my whole life. That's most of you, by the way. And by the way, you're candidates for pancreatic cancer. So what's the remedy for that? Start chewing. Fleetwood Mac works. Frank Sinatra works. Tupac works. Whatever it takes. Just keep chewing. These findings support hypotheses that dietary intake of the fiber in nuts during adolescence influence subsequent breast disease. You want your children to have less breast cancer in the future, less cysts? Give them raw nuts when they're young. Not sugary drinks, even if they're organic. Daily ingestion of 56 grams, that's a very small amount, of walnuts improve endothelial function. That's the chemistry inside of every vein that prevents heart attacks and strokes. Pretty interesting stuff, huh? Better than having a heart attack or close to a heart attack and then needing some medicine that really doesn't work. What it does is destroy your liver, destroy your heart, and destroy your brain. Processed food, scary stuff. Most of you that eat health food are eating processed food. Most health food is processed food. And it has the same BPA plastic on it that the 7-Eleven food has on it. You don't see, it says corn-made plastic, soy-made plastic, it just says plastic. So they looked at 45,000 adults. That's a pretty significant study. They looked at them for 2 years. Higher intake of ultra-processed food. The number one ultra-processed food is called microwave food. Let's just spend a minute on, I know a lot of you use microwave. Well, we have busy lives. So we just nuke our food. First time I was introduced, 1960, when I was on a date. This girl's father worked for GE. He had a prototype microwave in their house. My girlfriend and I went in, that girl and her boyfriend, and the mother took us over to the microwave, and it was a little square box in the wall, and it had something this big to look at. All our little heads were there. I don't think I've been the same since. I think it was radiated. And I was shocked because when I used to eat cooked apples, the only time I'd eat fruit if it was cooked or cooked in a can with sugar. How about that stuff? How about those peaches? I used to eat those peaches, my teeth would hurt. Bang, ba-bung, ba-dung. The worst were the apples in the TV dinners. Remember those apples that would stick to the aluminum? Feel them? Boy, they'd stick to my teeth, but I couldn't stop eating them because the sugar was so good in it. So back to it. And I remember watching the apple cook in 2 minutes. We were stunned. And the father came down, a real egghead. He had a crew cut, thick glasses. We said, how did that happen? He said, well, we disturbed the molecular structure. I didn't know what a molecular structure was. I was just a young kid at that point. But I'll never forget that, because what they do is they actually take the natural rhythm of life that all moves in a clockwise manner and spin it in the opposite direction. And when the molecules start to hit one another, it breaks down and destroys what you're cooking, causing disruption for your DNA and RNA. So ultra-processed food, much higher death rates. 4 to 6 years sooner when people consistently for only 2 years, not 20 years, not 30 years, only 2 years ate ultra-processed food, which, by the way, most health foods are. So be very cautious. There's a lot you can do, but you've got to center on somebody you don't like very much above you. And That's the problem. You've got to come to grips with yourself and start to recognize that you have the power of God inside you. There's nothing you can't do, nothing you can't be, nothing you can't achieve. Everyone can heal anything. And all a disease is a temporary wake-up call. It's either going to bring you home, make you part of the soil again, or raise you to a human level. And that's your choice. But it's all inside of your heart, not your head. Remember, we keep using our head, and our head gets us in trouble. We've got to stop using the head, and we've got to use the heart. The heart has the power and the message in it. The heart has the drive to take you to the finish line, to make you be relentless until you actually reverse a catastrophic disease or prevent a disease or have a happy life. I hope someday, like you will not tolerate anything but a happy life. Why would you? Only one reason. You don't love and respect and honor yourself. You don't have gratitude for your life. That's the only reason you tolerate less than a happy and successful life. And don't tell me the problems you have and all society's against you. That's all nonsense. You're against you. That's it. In love with avocados. Avocados are part of the berry family, and now we know something I didn't know. I used to be wrong on this. I used to say, don't eat too many avocados, going to give you problems with fat. Now we know it reduces plaque and fat in the arteries. Now that doesn't mean you should go completely nuts and eat 10 avocados a day, unless you want to be a chubette or look like I used to look. You know, if I continued on the path I was, I would have made a great Santa Claus. So the avocado, against all odds, literally take fat out of your arteries. Penn State researchers show us that. So what's really brilliant and wonderful for me, it used to be obscure institutes of research. Now it's all the major institutions that are slowly coming to ethics and honor and doing some legitimate research. The ones that are not being paid to give bogus information to you. Remember, their bread and butter, literally, at universities is to do bogus things for corporate interest. So these really great researchers probably feel so wonderful when they can do an actual research study that helps humanity, doesn't sell a product or push a product. How about the low-carb diets? My good friend, New Yorker, Dr. Atkins. Dr. Atkins was a friend of mine. I have to say something respectful to him. Then I'll start chopping him up. Dr. Atkins, God bless him, was one of the smartest men I ever met. And I don't say that tongue-in-cheek. He was a brilliant guy. He had knowledge that was unsurpassed. And by the way, he remembered things that most of us would forget in an hour. He remembered 30 years ago. And he wasted his brilliance and corrupted it for money. Many times I was on a show. We spent a lot of times in New York when I had an office in the city. And we used to beat the heck out of him when he came up with the Atkins diet, the first low-carb diet. And his premise was it made you lose weight. Well, the only way that in the beginning, and I'll say it again, in the beginning you lost weight, he got rid of the bread, the potatoes, and the pasta. The number one cause of fat, sugar. But as you saw, the studies show, after a 12-month, 14-month period, people not only gained the weight back, but they regained or gained more weight than they did. So when they've studied this, now they've had a lot of time since the 1970s to study it globally. Hundreds of thousands of people. What did they conclude? Required for health and longevity. All studies, including a report from the World Health Organization. They had to step in. Whenever you see the World Health Organization step in, it's because your governments aren't telling you the truth about what's happening. They're the people who step in when it's really being hidden from you. And what do they say? They point out that the diet rich in unprocessed carbohydrates, up to 90%, 5% complete and usable protein, and 5% essential fats, is the best ratio to maintain health and longevity. And the Blue Zone's report of all the longest living people on Earth thrive on a high carbohydrate diet. Now, when we say carbohydrates, don't get confused. We are not Dr. McDougall, who's still in the 70s, who says, by the way, great diet, I should go for this because I'm Irish. Eat all potatoes. How many of you are Irish here? My grandfather, we would have reveled in that. My parents, we would have said, wait, there's some doctor telling us we can eat nothing but potatoes and spuds? Well, that's fantastic. But you can't survive on potatoes. By the way, we know potatoes cause rheumatoid problems. When I met my wife in 1978 in Stockholm, Sweden, and fell in love with her the minute I looked at her, she was running the world's most famous center on inflammatory diseases. That unlike in the United States, where we're scrutinized by the government, who's in bed with these bad special interest people, her government supported the center she directed. And what they did is they took away white potatoes. They actually used raw white potato juice and helped to reverse osteo and rheumatoid arthritis and all other inflammatory conditions. And by the way, the government did $2.5 million of research to prove it. We don't have to reprove it. How many of you saw her in the film Fasting? If you haven't seen it, how many of you have Amazon Prime? None of you do it? I guess in Long Island you don't have that. Okay. So look at the people that raise their hand and invite you to their house. Any of you go to a Whole Food Market and have brains, you get 10% off by having Amazon Prime. Okay. So, by the way, they did a brilliant film on Amazon called Fasting. It's the latest research and data, Dr. Longo from USC, et cetera, and we're in there as the finishing of that movie. Listen to what Anna Maria says about inflammatory diseases and what the research showed at that point. So you want to die an early death, go on a low-carb diet. Up to 12 to 17 years sooner after 10 years of a low-carb diet. Low-carb diets after 1 decade, 12 years, 14 years, 16 or 17 years sooner, death. That's the real research. Low-carb diets are associated with significant risk of all forms of death. This is an equal opportunity killer. This doesn't only give you cancer or heart disease or diabetes. It gives you all of those things, or maybe 1 or 2 of those things. Turmeric, miracle stuff. Miracle stuff. Problem is, white people don't get the benefit Eastern Indians do. Eastern Indians, by the way, genetically over millennia, thousands of years, have developed a gene where small amounts of turmeric work really well for inflammation. Now we have the evidence that white people get little to none from small amounts. You have to have massive amounts. And I'm talking about 2-3 pounds of consumption of turmeric a day. Nobody's going to do that in their right mind unless you want to turn orange and smell like an Indian bazaar. What you need to do is to get the medicine, just like we took the capsicum, the medicine out of the cayenne. So you don't take a pound of that, you take drops of that. You take the medicine out of turmeric called curcuminoid. And by the way, when you do that, what we've been observing clinically now for 20 years, the use of it, we created the most substantial supplement on the planet with that one. It's Curcumin Plus. You use over 1 kilo to make 1 capsule. 1 capsule. You should see. But guess what? I'm going to tell you something that you don't suspect me, I would tell you. The number 1 anti-inflammatory is called pure water. Doesn't cost very much, by the way. Pure water. You say, wow, that's really weird. When you have a fire, what's inflammation? A fire. Do I take turmeric and throw it at the fire? Unless I was doing a ritual. Not really. You take water. So number 1 anti-inflammatory is water. That's a problem because, again, about 60% of you are dehydrated, not drinking enough fluid. So start drinking fluid and then take turmeric with the water, and boy, you're going to be in business. The other thing that holistic doctors tell you incorrectly is that inflammation creates disease. Wrong. Bad lifestyle creates inflammation, which, by the way, is a symptom in every single disease. Bad lifestyle is left out of that comment. Bad lifestyle. Inflammation doesn't come from nowhere. You have to work really hard to get inflamed, either emotionally or physically. Emotions create acidity quicker than bad food. What's the number 1 cause of people getting acid? Emotions. How many of you have ever noticed when you get really upset you can't even eat? The body shuts off and says, no, don't eat, smartly. Because if you eat when you have all of this cortisol running around and hormones, you won't digest the food. So the body shuts down. So the number 1 cause of the most, if you're stressed all of the time, a study just came out this morning. We read the study that said, by the way, negative attitude increases cancer growth inside of the body. How many of you read that this morning? Just this morning it came out. So what we've been teaching at Hippocrates for 64 years, they're now proving and supporting at this point. We have a comprehensive cancer program, by the way. That's the whole thing we do in there. We basically talk to people about changing their vision, their attitude, their optimism, finding their value, their strength, their power, so that, by the way, they no longer tolerate the disorder and the unhappiness and the potentiality of death. You have to fight death with death. Do you understand that? You got to kill death. You don't just sit back and say, oh, I hope I get well. You hope you're going to die. You got to kick ass to get well. You got to live in a world that is totally insane in a sane way and take the ridicule from all the nuts. That's what you got to. They're going to call you nuts when you do the right thing. When they sit at McDonald's and sip on their beer, that's perfectly fine. All fat as hell, watching football games, and they can't get off their ass to play. That's normal. Oh, I'm a sports enthusiast. How come you weigh 400 pounds then? Wake up, people. Demographic characteristics. Morbidity, you know what that is? Gallbladder pathology. All of this can be helped when our conclusion improves postoperative pain and fatigue related with all of these neurological and circulatory problems. So turmeric is a miracle. I'm going to tell you, the curcuminoids in turmeric is one of the most remarkable findings in the history of plant medicine. And by the way, even pharmaceutical medicine is plant medicine that they've corrupted so they could put patents on it. That's how the pharmaceutical industry started. They didn't think we're going to create a better medicine. They said we're going to find a way to control medicine. So they took plants and they manipulated plants, got patents on them. And the first generation didn't take it that serious. They just changed it a little bit. By the second, they went nuts. By the third, they think they know more than God in the universe. And they're creating stuff that 75% of the pharmaceutical drugs in the market, one of the side effects is death. What other product can you get away with saying, this may kill you, and you can still sell it? Other than a gun, which, by the way, it's not guns that kill, it's crazy people. The crazy people don't have guns. Wake the hell up. It's your right. It's your right to be smart. How about the refined carbs? Oh, I used to love those. I used to hang out with my buddies when we weren't at steakhouses, and pizzas back then is before they realized they could make a lot more money by making them small. Pizzas were so big, when you carried a pizza, you had 3 guys carrying it. Huh? And they'd say, you want extra cheese? I'd say, put triple cheese on. Can you imagine? My colon said, oh, this idiot's in the pizza parlor again. Triple cheese. I couldn't figure out why my nose ran from September until January, and then from January until June. And then I'd say, well, the summer's here. And then it ran again because I'd eat those sausages on the Jersey Shore. What the hell were they made out of? How many of you used to go to the Jersey Shore? We used to get in the car from New York and drive to Philadelphia to get cheesesteaks. Can you imagine? Refined carbohydrates. Now, the little surprise we all had in healthcare in the last 5 years is they found out that all meats raise your glucose more than carbohydrates. Let me repeat what I just said to you. So we used to think it's only carbohydrates that do this. I'm once again going to repeat that all meats raise your blood sugar, your diabetic potential more than carbohydrate. How about if you take carbohydrates and meat? Woo! And who doesn't eat sandwiches or pizzas with extra cheese or God knows what? Genetic modification, scary stuff. But one man, one good American man, stopped the world from doing that. And I want to give him some honor. Jeffrey Smith. But here in the United States, your evil government, by the way, in June, proposed to the 19 government organizations that your tax dollars pay for, shut up, because now we're going to bring in gene splicing, which makes genetic modification look like a Girl Scout camp. So the hush is on, and gene splicing. And once they unleash gene splicing, the end of the planet's Plant life is over. Say, Brian, you're a little dramatic and extreme. No, you're a little slow. I don't tell you anything that's not important. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to shake you up. Hopefully provoke your heart to waken up. Such comparisons, however, suggest that these actions may not limit the skeletal muscle problem. So now we have evidence. They said, there's no proof that this hurts the body. It eats bones, genetic modified food does. Eats the bones. Eats the tissue. If it eats a bone, hard tissue, what does it do to the heart? What does it do to the liver? What does it do to the kidney? And now kidney disorders are going like this. And now we have a disease called Leaky Gut Syndrome. What the heck do you think that is? Genetically modified food. And you watch. Now with the gene splicing, people, when they're babies, won't be able to hold their bowels. That's where we're heading with this stuff. Beetroot greens. Don't eat the beetroot, eat the greens. Nitric oxide. Amazingly, amazingly good for the heart, for the brain, for the libido. I'll say that. Libido. I heard something about the brain and the heart, but what? Consumption of nitrate rich will improve running performance in healthy adults. So when they have runners now, they take the beet greens and eat them or they juice them, and they can actually have greater endurance, less respiratory problems, and the triathlons, this is a common thing they're using now. And they tried the difference between the green beet and the ground up beet powder, and the green of the beet was 14 times more effective. I'll repeat it, 14 times more effective. Greens of this root vegetable are exceptional, provide nitric oxide. There you go, the bone broth, there you go. Any of you that bought into that thing, we'll pray. We're going to have a prayer meeting after this for you people. How about probiotics? Incredibly important for you, because almost everyone here does not have a balanced bacteria in your intestinal tract. You don't have a balanced bacteria, you don't have good immunity. Don't have good immunity, you don't have good psychology, because it all works hand in hand. We're no longer in a period in history where dentists are told, your mouth has nothing to do with the rest of my body. Everything is interconnected, and you're interconnected to everything else. Not every other person, but everything on this planet and everything off this planet. We are connected intimately and ultimately and consistently to all life forms everywhere in the multiple universes. And that's a fact. Enzymes. We take 50 a day for anti-aging. Nothing works better for anti-aging than that, because it increases the electromagnetic frequency in and around your cells. Artificial sweeteners. Aspartame was put on the market during Ronald Reagan's administration, and it was actually taken out of the Pentagon. It was a nerve gas component. Studies have shown now that when people are consistently taking aspartame, at the end of the year, they generally weigh 12 pounds more than people who took normal soda. Ginger, amazingly good. Helps the nervous system, helps with pain, helps to regulate temperatures. On a cool day like this, it makes you warmer. On a hot day in Florida, it makes you cooler. Use herbs and spices and learn about them. One of the great books written in the 1800s was written by a guy named Toll, and Garden of Eden, Back to Eden. So read Back to Eden. Traditional herbology. It's better than anything written today, because a lot of these herbs that we use today. Now, cooked food, why is cooked food so damaging? Look at the bottom of this. There are 3 scientifically validated reasons. Number 1, leukocytosis, where when you eat even a cooked plant-based organic food, the immune system attacks it, weakening your immune system. Not an opinion, a fact. Number 2, acrylamides, discovered in my wife's country and now studied all over the world, the Italians leading the research on this. Another carcinogen when you cook these carbohydrate foods, even organic ones. And last, heated oils. From the time I was a little baby boy, we've known heated oils cause cancer. That's why cooked food is bad for you. Antioxidants, once you cook a food, they're gone. And we looked, over 90% of all so-called antioxidant supplements on the market give you free radicals. They're made out of chemicals. They're not made out of plants. They're not made out of whole food. So antioxidants in fruits and vegetables are the best, or you have to have an A+ level of supplement that literally has not been heated, not been cooked. How many of you know when antioxidants were first discovered? 1954. Sunscreens, plastics, two deadly things. If you're going to use a sunscreen, you've got to use something like the Become line we make. If you can't eat it, it shouldn't be on you. Plastics are all over. Stop using straws. West Palm Beach 2 weeks ago outlawed the use of plastic straws. The world's got to do that. Make sure you're wearing organic undergarments and natural fiber clothes. They give you diseases. Read our book, Killer Clothes, on that one. You're sleeping in beds that are not organic, you're crazy. You're spending 8 hours, 9 hours a day in bed. All of the polyester beds are outgassing, and all of those memory foams are going to change your memory for good. The most grievous thing that has ever happened, I pointed it out, 5G. If you're not wearing something like this high-end, high-pulse, HHI pulse, you're insane. You're being zapped by 5G as we sit in this room, no less at your home and in your offices and all over. You've got to protect yourself because your government's not protecting you. EMF. Look at the extraordinary documentary that was made in New York City. The closer you live to a cell tower, the higher incidence of cancer and mental illness. Use future medicine. I have a whole department at Hippocrates that's unique in the world called the Energy Medicine Department with the state-of-the-art technology on increasing the electromagnetic frequency in your cells and your organ systems, which, by the way, is the future of healthcare and medicine, not chemistry. We're moving into electromagnetic frequency, stem cells, and manipulation of nutritional science. Do not use pesticides, fungicides, and herbicides in your home, in your offices. Do not use synthetic supplements. 90% of supplements on the market are deadly chemicals, bad for you, even the ones these holistic doctors are dispensing. Read the book, Supplements Exposed. You're spending a penny ever, you better be knowledgeable about how they've corrupted supplements in the 1930s. Air and water pollution, campaign against it. At the beginning of this talk, we all stood up and we took an oath that we're going to join the army of love. Well, how you do that is say no and stop this insanity. Challenge your local governments. They're the ones letting the local polluters. Don't deny climate change. It's insane. The beaches I've been walking on in Florida for over 30 years, half the time I can't walk on. They don't exist. That happened after one summer when half of the ice in Greenland melted. One summer, 2 months. Take infrared saunas and saunas every day. I was in a sauna today, and every day you should take it. Give yourself as a gift an infrared sauna. Takes 87% more heavy metals and chemicals out than the sauna I took at the LA Fitness this morning. Don't let stressful propaganda hold you down. You are being manipulated. The first words I told you in this lecture is you're being manipulated. Take my word for this. You think you're a free thinker, they're manipulating every thought, every action, every move you're making, and trying to get you to fit in because you're lost and confused. You want community, and they want you to join their community so that they can manipulate you, and you can buy from them. Mind enhancement is to quiet your mind, find yourself, and empower yourself. Spend time in contemplation, prayer, meditation. Get quiet. Make it happen every single day. Attitudinal enhancement. You can change your negative thought. I just told you 8 minutes ago, the study that came out this morning, this day, told you negative thought makes cancer grow. They photographed it. Take the dentistry out of your mouth that's killing you. The root canals, the mercury, the implants. These things are killing you and affecting every organ inside of your body. Move and exercise. This isn't an option. This is as important as eating a plant-based diet and having a good attitude.